Good evening, and thank you for being with us this evening. I hope you're all well and doing okay. Tonight is our Wednesday evening service for the Farmington Church of Christ, and it's lesson 2 as we continue to look at the book of Psalms. Um, so let's just get right into it tonight. Question: how would you describe God? What is God like? Well, that's a really hard question. And there are no simple answers to either of those questions. Why? Why? Well, we're physical beings, and we describe things in physical terms, and but God isn't physical like us. So it's very difficult for us to understand and equate to that. Uh, you remember the last time that we were together, we explored the concept of vivid images and figurative language and some other things that were used in Hebrew poetry, which Psalms is part of that. So, what maybe the psalmist can use these tools to describe something we honestly don't know how to do. We just can't do it. One of the best metaphors um, might be in Psalms 23, the 23rd Psalm. You remember where it says there, "The Lord is my shepherd." So tonight we want to look at this idea from Psalms 18. We're going to look there, and the very familiar psalm in chapter 23. So let's begin with Psalm 23. And I bet you most of you can recite it. This is something a lot of us have memorized. But let's read it together. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever." Psalms 23 is one of the most loved psalms of all of them, and like we said last time, there are 150. But generations of us have memorized it for comfort and for strength. It uses poetic language to describe a relationship between God and his people. And I like to think of it as on a personal level between God and me. And certainly, I think we can see that personal level as we go on through it tonight that David had. We think David being the author of this. We see in verse 1 the subject is the Lord, or Yahweh to the Hebrew. This is the God who created the heavens and the earth. This is the God that spoke to Abraham, appeared to Moses in the burning bush, delivered the children of Israel from bondage, and the God that everyone knows. It's interesting how such a God can be described with such gentle language, though, as a shepherd and sheep, the relationship of shepherd and sheep. Now, sheep are a common subject in the Bible. It was a very important livestock animal, and it still is in a lot of parts of the world today. I know here in Northwest Arkansas we raise a lot of sheep, and my neighbor at one time had sheep, and I watched the sheepdogs work. I'm told that sheep are helpless, defenseless animals, must be watched over and cared for all the time. We know that a very close relationship developed between the shepherd and the sheep. The shepherd lived with them, and the sheep relied on the shepherd for protection, for food and water, for everything. So, does the shepherd sheep metaphor give us a good picture of how God cares for us? Well, I think it does. It's a, like we said, it's a metaphor. Describing God is very difficult. Also, in verse 1, we read the term, I shall not want, which tells us the shepherd can be relied on. Sheep that are in danger are nervous critters, nervous about everything. And so the expression lie down in verse 2, lie down in green pastures in verse 2 implies safety and security. What does still waters imply to you? Well, rushing waters, like some of our creeks, would be a dangerous place for a herd of sheep, wouldn't they? So it's figurative language that we can that paints a picture for us. In verse 3, we shift away from the shepherd a little bit. It is God who will restore our souls. Many people try to find their own way and do it alone and don't acknowledge that there's a God to help. So, but only the Good Shepherd can provide blessings and guidance for his people. We need him, and it's that simple. Verse 4 uses the term valley of the shadow of death. That term is familiar to most humans on this planet and has been for centuries. What a vivid image. The sheep are in search of good pasture and water continually. Sometimes to get there, the journey is dangerous. We will at times find ourselves in that dark valley, will we not? David experienced a lot of this in his life, didn't he? He tells us it's easy to enjoy God's presence when things are going good. David reminds us here that even when things do not go well, and we find ourselves in that dark valley, that God is still with us. The simple tools of a shepherd, like a rod and staff, protect and guide us. And what a comfort. Let's look at verses 5 and 6 again. And the metaphor changes some. Now it is more like a host and a guest situation. One role of the host is to prepare a table, isn't it? Now, I really don't want my head anointed with oil this day and age, I don't think, when I go visit someone, but it was a common practice back then. So, a thing that they did. I do understand my cup overflows. To me, that's very significant. It means plenty for everyone. It's not portioned out. It's plenty. The Lord's blessing can be described as goodness and mercy. Some translations have goodness and love in that place. Others have the term loving kindness or unfailing love, but they're all very descriptive and wonderful. Well, let's quickly look at some other metaphors for God. And to do that, I want to turn over to Psalms 18. This one might not be as familiar to a lot of us, but let's read verses 1 through 6, and we'll begin. I love you, O Lord, my strength. The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer, my God, my rock, in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. I call upon the Lord who is worthy to be praised, and I am saved from my enemies. The cords of death encompassed me, the torrents of destruction assailed me. The cords of Sheol entangled me, the snares of death confronted me. In my distress I called upon the Lord. To my God I cried for help. From his temple he heard my voice, and my cry to him reached his ears. You know, David in his early years was a shepherd, so he understood all the terms that we saw there in the 23rd Psalm, and could have easily related to all of that. Well, what was he in his latter years? Well, he was a soldier. And we read about the many battles that he was in and predicaments that he got in. But he knew the terrors of battle. He knew what it was like to barely escape with his life. Did you ever have an experience in your life where you're not sure how you survived it? I have, and I just know that God had a hand in it, or I wouldn't be here. We all do things we shouldn't have done. There just had to be God's helping hand there. Well, there are 8 metaphors in verses 1 and 2 that I want us to look at, to notice real quick. As he is described, God is described as my strength, a rock, a fortress, a deliverer, the horn of my salvation. Some translations have the word stronghold in there. We can understand that. Well, these images come from David's battle days as a soldier. And a soldier needs a place of safety, a rock that you can get behind, or a fortress that's defendable. A soldier also needs a place to rest a little bit along the way and prepare for the next day. So David paints this picture for us. David wrote in very poetic terms about the cords of death in verse 4. His life was in danger, and he knew it. He could have died very easily. So he says he feared the snares of death. Now, we know from reading the Bible that David got near death many times. Only with God's help did he survive many of these situations and battles that he got in. So, what is God like? Well, with this poetry and the use of images and figurative language like we studied last time, we can start to describe God. Is it scientific terms? No, it's not meant to be. In fact, we're not capable of that. It's a shepherd. It's a host caring for guests. It's a fortress or a shield for a soldier in battle. These verses have been read and given comfort to people for centuries and centuries. And it's my hope that they fill you and give you comfort too. So our lesson is yours, and a short one tonight. We really thank you for listening. We want you to be safe in these troubled times, and God bless you.